Hi folks, this is International Master Kostya Kavutskiy, and today I'll be doing a video on attacking on the 7th and 8th ranks. Specifically, we're going to focus on common tactics and tactical motifs that you would see when you're attacking along the 7th and 8th ranks. So we'll just be looking at a couple of puzzles where that'll be the main theme. Here in our first position, it's white to play and you're looking for a forced win. If you'd like, you can pause the video and try to solve the position for yourself. I would encourage you to do so. It's always better to try and learn actively rather than just sitting back and watching. And if you're done, we're going to move on to the solution now. So the position appears pretty balanced. Black has an extra pawn, but white has some play on the king side. And here white wins with a direct move rook 1 e7, hitting the queen on c7 and setting this rook up very actively along the 7th rank. The point of white's move is seen after black plays queen to c6. Here white wins with queen takes f5, simply capturing the rook, and black is lost here. Taking the queen with the pawn just leads to immediate mate. Rook takes f5 is illegal, and if black tries rook takes e8, white has queen f6 check followed by queen to g7 mate, and white is winning. Black can also try queen takes e8, but black is simply losing material after rook takes e8, and white is going to remain with an extra queen. Nothing is changed by black throwing in bishop e3 check. It looks scarier than it really is, but white has a number of moves here. He can play bishop f2. In fact, he can even play king to f1. Although this looks a little bit scary, white is still winning here since this queen is untouchable by black's rook. White just has too much play in the 7th and 8th ranks. Even queen h1 check king e2. Black is eventually going to run out of checks and is going to have to deal with the consequences of white's pressure. So this was a nice little tactic, this queen takes f5. Based on this pin on the 8th rank, and of course white's rook was needed on the 7th rank in order to put black's king in a mating net. So with that, we'll move on to our next example. Our next position is black to play and win. This one looks simple but is actually quite tricky, especially if you haven't seen the motif before. Black is currently down a piece but does have the move, and if you'd like to solve the position for yourself, once again, you can pause the video. Here black wins, starting with rook to c2 check. This move is obvious enough. White's king cannot go back to g1 because queen takes h2 is just going to be mate. But white does have a defense in rook to d2. And now, unless you saw black's next move, you haven't fully solved the puzzle. How does black win here? Well, with the very nice and aesthetic move, queen to d1. This is truly a very beautiful move, and this is what we call a cross pin. White's rook on d2 is already pinned along the 2nd rank, and black pins it a second time along the d file, and white is losing material. We cannot take the queen because white's king would be in check, of course, and if rook takes c2, black wins the queen on d6. And otherwise, black is just winning the rook on d2. White has no way of defending the rook, and black is taking this rook with check. This cross pin is something that happens from time to time when you have this pressure in your opponent's camp. It's a very beautiful motif, especially if you haven't seen before, and it can often even be confusing. You're not even sure exactly how it works, and you have to just sort through the variations and make sure that all the lines are working in your favor. This is kind of a simple illustration, but here it's clear that black is winning. And with that, we'll move on to our next example. Here, once again, we have black to play and win. Now, this problem is quite challenging because there's a number of different variations that need to be calculated. So if I were you, I would pause the video and try to calculate for a good 10 minutes. You can even write down the variations just to make sure you're not confusing yourself. So I'll give you a chance to pause the video, and now we'll move on with the solution. So black's first move is quite obvious, rook to g5 check. And now white has to make the first of several choices. Rook g2 is the best defense. If king h2, white's king is in trouble after rook to h5 check. King g1 runs into rook h1 mate or queen h1. King g3, this king is most likely not going to survive. I think rook e3 check most likely leads to victory here for black. For example, rook f3, we can play rook g5 check, and this king is gonna have a hard time staying in contact with the rook on f3, let alone avoid getting mated. So black is most likely winning here. I think king h4, we can take on f3, and so on. So rook g2 is a better defense. And if we take on g2, white takes with the queen and seemingly covers the king, although black is still to be preferred there. But queen c5 check is much stronger. And again, white has a choice. He can block with the queen on f2 or with the rook, or he can move his king to the h file. Now king h1, this is met with rook h5 check, rook h2, and now the strongest move here is to bring the second rook into e5, and white's king is just not going to survive this assault. We're threatening to take, followed by rook h5 check. It's important that rook f8 is covered by the queen on c5, otherwise that would be an unpleasant surprise. And white is just not surviving here. Rook f2 is most likely met with rook e1 check, and the king has to go for a walk. Black is also threatening queen c6 check in this position as well. Rook f2, this would run into rook e1 check, and now the king has to go to h2, and after rook h5, the king is again having to go for a walk and is most likely getting mated here. King g3, for example, and black has a number of moves. I think queen e5 looks pretty strong, followed by either rook e3 or rook e4, and white is just getting mated here once again. So all these lines are quite tricky to calculate, but I think if your visualization is clear and you just take it one step at a time, it is definitely doable for a player of 1800 strength. And the last move, the most important one, is what to do after queen f2. And here black has only one way to win. And if you saw the solution in advance to seeing this position, then good for you, you're doing everything right. If not, this might be another time to pause the video and try to find the winning idea for black. Be very, very helpful for your own chess ability if you're able to do so. Well, black's best move is the astonishing rook to e2. This is another kind of crosspin, or a variation of the crosspin tactic. The point is that we're attacking the queen. After queen takes c5, we take the rook on g2, and we get the famous two rooks along the 7th rank mate. A very, very beautiful finish to this very nice problem. So this problem required some serious geometric thinking, especially when you have queen and two rooks against queen and two rooks. The variations can be very confusing. I'd encourage you guys to go back through the problem and play through the variations once again when you take a look at the PGN, because I think it'll really help your calculation in future cases. And this idea of the rook e2, if you've never seen this motive before, can be very hard to find over the board. But hopefully now that you've seen it once, you're more likely to store this pattern in your memory and be able to see it again. With that, we'll wrap up our lesson here. Make sure to check out the exercises for more thematic motives when it comes to attacking on the 7th and 8th ranks. And until next time, this has been International Master Kostya Kavutskiy signing off.